Technology. Yeah, like some people say about their spouse, can't live with them, can't live without it. I've been working on a couple of technology issues over the past few weeks. I'm doing a trial on a device called the Lumen. We're going to be covering it more fully later on. What it does is, or what it purports to do is, it will take a sample of your breath and tell you how much you're burning carbs versus burning fat. Obviously, that's a big deal, a very big deal for people interested in the content on this channel, interested in insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, major focus points. And one of the major challenges just coming out of the blocks with this thing was I'm eating mostly fats, very few carbs, and yet it's telling me I'm burning mostly carbs. I'm just wondering where in the heck they're coming from. But anyhow, it has helped me focus on my diet. That's not what today's show is about. Today's show is about the Freestyle Libre 3. I remember that came out, gosh, at this point, maybe close to 10 years ago, the Freestyle Libre, and it came out in Europe, and the FDA in the US just hesitated for several years before they opened it up here. And I felt very frustrated that they did. As you start getting into using technology like the Libre 3, you realize that, yeah, it's got a lot of challenges, but bottom line, for those of us who've gone for 60 years not knowing what our blood sugar is, and then beginning to actually understand what our blood sugar is, it's like driving a car with no speedometer for 60 years and then realizing, oh, I've been going 65, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour and never knew it. On the other hand, again, it gets back to the issue of tech and glitches. We're going to go deeper into those glitches today. We're also going to cover a short topic on diabetes and erectile dysfunction. Obviously, sex is a huge issue for all of us in terms of our lives. And or if it's not, maybe it should be. And it's clearly a favorite topic for Jesus and myself. So diabetes, atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease has a major overlap with erectile dysfunction. So we'll be covering that in the short form today. Now, Jesus, why don't you take it away for the rest of the intro here?
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for being on the show today. We have really good information to share with you. And just a reminder, if you're new to the channel, this is the kind of stuff we talk about every Wednesday. If you go into the channel and look for previous topics, you will find that we had a really interesting discussion last week with Clean Slate, our guest, who shared with us his calcium score numbers, his CIMT results, and how he's finding low carb to be a way to stabilize his soft plaque. We talked with Dr. Feldberg and Ariana Feldberg about oral cardiovascular connection. Oral health and cardiovascular disease, heart attacks has been a really, really important topic of discussion for a few years now. And detecting that is important. We went back to CIMTs. And we also talk about statins and cardiovascular risk and how statins have pleiotropic effects who address inflammation issues on low doses. And we made a summary of the evidence. We have a lot of people always talking and asking, hey, where's the evidence that supports that using statins is good for prevention? On that video, you will find more about that. Our main channel is YouTube, of course, but we have a couple of folks who are seeing the program on Rumble and on Locals. And on Locals, we have some exclusive content. If you want to go check it out, don't miss out of that. One more thing that we have been promoting lately is become a member of the YouTube channel. You can subscribe to the channel. You can click on the bell to get notifications when we're going to go live. And if you click on join, you will have other benefits like getting your questions answered first on the Q&A section.
Hey, sis, before you go back to that, I want to make a comment. Um, a new friend of mine has introduced me to a YouTube series called Diary of a CEO. The fellow's name is I think is it Stephen Bennett? Anyhow, in his introduction, he mentions that only 59% of the people that are watching his show. He's got a great story, by the way, and very interesting channel. They talk about some health, but they mostly talk about people and success and the demons that drive people's success. But anyhow, the reason I'm bringing it up here was he's had a series of comments over the past few months saying it's only like 59% of the people that watch our show have subscribed. We want to get that to the mid 60s. Guess what our percentage is? I looked it up last night.
I will say around 30.
22%.
Yeah.
Big. It's a big deal. I mean, it may not make a difference to you as the viewer, but it makes a huge difference to us as a channel. We have 150,000 subscribers. If we were to even just double our percentage to 44, that would take us up to what? 300,000 subscribers. That's a big deal in terms of helping the channel. So, and it doesn't cost you a thing. If you don't mind, just click on that subscribe button, please. Thanks, Jesus.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And let me tell you, 50, 60% if is actually one of those higher average for a YouTube channel.
I just never knew to. I've never mentioned it. I never knew to request it. I mean, we've mentioned it in the past, but we never really discussed it. I never knew. I just never knew.
One thing that I have seen as a barrier is that if you want to subscribe, you have to have a YouTube account. So we have a lot of folks that maybe I seen the YouTube channel without an account, so they won't subscribe. But if you do have a YouTube account, go ahead, set it up and subscribe. So that helps a lot.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, the book, but the Dr. Brewer likes to say not so new book anymore, but it's really critical information. This is one of those things that led to the channel being created. A lot of folks going into the ER with a heart attack and thinking that it was a sudden event, when there are actually ways to know and predict if that's going to happen. And we cannot tell you for sure that a stress test is not one of those methods. You'll find more about that on the book, how stress tests are not made for preventing heart attacks, and there are other resources that you can use. We have been working also on the PrevMed Network channel. We have been working with new providers. We are hoping that in the next months or year, we're going to be able to create a good network for prevention. We have a channel for that. So if you can refer your doctor over there. And talking about programs we're implementing, we have been working for months now on the Medicare program. We have had a really terrific response. A lot of people are coming to us and getting a schedule to see Dr. Brewer and getting that under their Medicare umbrella. Right now, we're accepting traditional Medicare only. We're hoping to accept Medicare Advantage in the future, but for now, it's just traditional Medicare. Don't miss out of that opportunity. Give us a call or send us an email. We'll be happy to put you on the waiting list. Gilbert can show the phone number if you want to try that. And if
let
you
me
are
just say this, in terms of the waiting list, a lot of folks, again, have, you sometimes get a little bit frustrated about a waiting list. We're doing this as quickly as we can. We have actually, I haven't seen the numbers. I mean, I've seen the numbers, but I haven't gotten a good comparison yet. I know we tripled our volume and then tripled again. So I think we're probably at least 10 times what we were seeing just a few months ago. Where, interestingly enough, we're actually improving our quality and improving the patient experience. Now, how we do that is a discussion for another time. But we're working hard. We've brought on another provider. She's full time, great experienced uh, primary care nurse practitioner named Jeannie. We've also brought on another one named Heather. And one of the things you might say is, well, I just want to see Dr. Brewer. That he's the name that and the voice that I hear on the channel. Obviously, we can't spread me out that far. And my sweet spot, I have been in a role of hiring and managing the performance for providers, as many as 700 at MD Live, 700, about 1,000 at premise on site. So it really is my sweet spot to be able to step up to a little bit higher level and manage the structures which manage quality. And that's one of the reasons that we've been able to improve our quality over the recent past while we're growing so much, because we're able to go ahead and hire and develop a quality management team and a patient experience team. So don't think that you get on the wait list and it's going to be months and months. We are responding and growing rapidly. Go ahead and check out the wait list, and let's see if we can get to you.
Yep. And just so people know, having new providers doesn't mean that you're going to get your traditional primary care provider. Both Jeannie and Heather are really capable and smart providers who are learning or specifics on this space and how to do prevention, as Dr. Brewer does. And if you are not on age to be on Medicare, you can, or if you don't want to go through the Medicare route, because we have had some cases like that, you can go ahead and go to the website prevmedhealth.com and check out the packages that we have for you. You can buy either 2, 3, 5 visits with the team and a couple of health coaching sessions if you want to try that as well. And we just simplified this packages a few weeks back, and it's been really good. It's making things simpler, easier for patients to know what they want to pay for when seeing Dr. Brewer for any specific advice. We do a lot. Dr. Brewer has been doing a lot for years of free information giving with the YouTube channel, but there's always something else that you can get for a specific medical advice, and that's something we cannot do over YouTube. That's why the packages are there. So for the short topic for today, Dr. Bruce sent me an interesting conference video from Dr. Vessels from the University of Washington talking about mechanisms of diabetes and erectile dysfunction. And there's one thing for a lot of people, it's news that diabetes might be related to erectile dysfunction. To a lot of people, that is not news. They know that there is a link over there. What a lot of people doesn't know is that this goes far beyond that just high blood glucose level, far beyond that just nerve damage. There's a lot of research that's talking about how other metabolic processes are impacting the health of the endothelium within those areas and producing erectile dysfunction. So on this talk, the Dr. Bessels presented a lot of evidence on how there's damage to the endothelium, to the cell wall. There is a low oxygen flow, a lot of other markers of inflammation related, damaging the arterial wall, creating oxidative stress, which is damaging all of those structures. It's not just the nerves, it's the nerves and the vessels. Decreasing the amount of nitric oxide. And if you remember the mechanisms of erection, you have to vasodilate, you have to expand those arteries so there's blood flow going there, and nitric oxide is critical for that process. So diabetes and insulin resistance is impacting those molecular pathways, cellular pathways as well. These RHO kinase, which is also called ROC, uh, those are molecular mechanisms that if they get activated, they increase muscular contraction. The small muscles on the area are getting more contracted, or they're not getting relaxed enough, and you need to get those vessels relaxed in order to get a good erection. So they're even researching RHO kinase inhibitors as treatment for erectile dysfunction. And there's another molecule that is produced in the liver that is called ceruloplasmin, that also has been related. The increase on ceruloplasmin might be related to erectile dysfunction issues. Why is this all this stuff important? All this stuff is important because this just gives more evidence that controlling diabetes, targeting insulin resistance, is going to provide a lot of benefits, even for ED. Of course, medications help for ED. Those can increase the amount of nitric oxide, increase relaxation of the vessels. But if you all have an uncontrolled diabetes issue, if you have a severe insulin resistance issue, that might not be enough. And we're talking about the root causes of cardiovascular disease, and ED is a reflection of that. Any
So,
comments?
yes, I am trying to, as you know, we've discussed this. I'm trying to figure out how to tell this story appropriately. We've, I've never really covered ED. I just didn't want to go there. Really didn't even think it was important for our population. I mean, it's like, how dumb can you get? What's more important than sex? And it's such an issue in terms of cardiovascular patients, diabetes patients. And it was a few months ago, one of our patients in his mid-60s rediscovered sex. And it was like, he said, gosh, I think I died and went to heaven. And I've been we've been having conversations. I think he and mostly his partner are nervous about, just how much to share and what to share. But the point is, there's a major impact in terms of life, enjoyment of life, that revolves around sex, which is just significantly impacted by the conditions we deal with. So we're struggling right now in terms of how to tell the stories, but the clinical information does not change. And so we're starting to get a little bit more information out there about this. Comments, questions would be welcome.
Yeah, and Dr. Brewer knows this. We haven't explored that so often. I do use that information on my private practice in Mexico, but I'm also a relationships and sexual health coach. So I do have a couple of patients in Mexico that come for advice on this area. And when talking about sex, of course, I always, one of the first things that I talk about is safety is really important. There's a lot of venereal diseases out there that you have to be careful of, but it's a critical piece. And one thing that men with diabetes has, first they say, okay, my life might be over because I might have kidney damage, eye damage, and all of that. But they sometimes are even accepting the fact that their sex life might be over as well, and that should not
When
be the
it's not.
case. Yeah.
When it's often not. I mean, that's again it's one of the biggest eye openers for me in terms of running this channel, how prevalent that is, that concept that, just sex is basically over for me. And it's like, oh, so
And
it's interesting. We started covering, we've got a series over the past 3 months. We started covering items on ED and men's health. And sure enough, after covering that first short topic on it, a dozen men so far have started saying, "Hey, can we talk about that?" So it's a topic. It's just not folks in our group. A lot of boomers in our group, and boomers as a demographic are just not that comfortable talking about sex yet.
Yeah, and we I think we showed an statistics last week or that 2 weeks ago. More than 50% of folks about around 40, 50s are dealing with any level or grade of erectile dysfunction.
So
Okay,
there you go.
so much for the short content. Let's go
And
to the main
Gilbert,
topic.
if you'll give us the water ball, we'll get into the long show, the long content. So I'll get us started, Jesus, if you want. And so here's the thing. As I said before, I was very excited to find out that there was a thing called a continuous glucose monitor, Freestyle Libre, 5-6 years ago, and then it was about to be adopted by the FDA. Before that, there were even several of us who were finding ways to obtain it from Europe, because continuous monitoring of your glucose is such a big deal. Once you get the item, there's several reactions. One of the first one is, as I said, gosh, I wish they had done a little bit more development on this thing. And we're going to share with you some of the challenges that we had. The first night, the new Libre 3 woke me up at midnight. And it's because they've got a whole new set of alarms. We'll talk about those alarms a little bit later. You've got to be careful on what you set up. The Freestyle Libre, for the vast majority of its engineering, is set up for people that have very advanced diabetes, people that are on an insulin pump. And somebody that's on an insulin pump, if their blood sugar goes down to 50s and 60s and especially the 50s, even if it's 3 a.m, they need to wake them up so they can go eat some cookies or something, because that exogenous insulin, that insulin that pump is pushing in there, can cause them to drop down into the 20s and teens and have a seizure. Well, there's a couple of problems with that. The first one is it's way too late to wait till somebody's on an insulin pump to start giving them this kind of information. And number two, people like most of us who are way earlier than that and don't want to ever get there and never will get on insulin, let alone on a pump, we get fat adapted, and especially between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., we're going to start hitting the 60s and even the 50s and feel fine. That's what fat adaptation is all about. So, the insurance companies are not going to pay for it for prevention, at least maybe not in my lifetime, even if I live 60 more years. But I'll tell you, it's become an industry. The rest of industry is beginning to recognize that. You see companies that are starting to provide that, and people are paying for that on their own. You see ads for it all the time. There's a reason why that's happening. This information is critical. So let me back up for a second, Jesus, and why don't you go through you can help present the day.
Yeah, and first I would like to start talking about what is a continuous glucose monitor, because we have seen patients where we start talking about, hey, have you considered using a CGM device, and they're like, I don't even know what it is. What is that? And CGM devices are the ones that help you monitor your glucose levels without a finger stick, without having to pinching your finger to get a blood sample. So you just use the sensor, place it under your skin. It's not painful. The needle is just really, really tiny needle. And the very first one had a specific device. You can see that with the Freestyle Libre 2. They have a device that you can use to measure the levels with the sensor, but the new models help you do that with using your phone and a Bluetooth mechanism usually, or Wi-Fi connection, and that's going to provide a lot of information about where your blood glucose is anytime you want to measure that. Sensors last around 10 to 14 days, and the more popular ones are Freestyle Libre and Dexcom G6. Dr. Brewer has done some some reviews on those, and I think your overall conclusion they are really similar, but Freestyle Libre is a little bit better, right, Doctor Brewer?
Well, here's the thing. It depends on what you're talking about. The Dexcom, you can. I actually bought a Dexcom and a Freestyle Libre and put both of them on my body at the same time. I fully expected. I mean, at the time, I spent like $700 on that Dexcom and $70 on the Libre. I fully expected, given what I had seen in the literature and what I'd seen with my patients, that the Dexcom would just really beat the Libre. I was completely surprised. The Libre came in closer to the finger stick checks that I was doing than the Dexcom. I just was blown away. Now, I still don't think that the Libre is better than the Dexcom. The Dexcom has some components like you can adjust it once you begin to find out, okay, it's running 10 high on average or 10 low or whatever. You can't do that with the Libre. Both of them give you um, some warning that they think this might be a little bit off. You might want to get a finger stick to just check it. But again, I didn't expect the Libre. This was back in the time of the Libre 1, and I didn't expect the Libre to outperform the Dexcom. Because I saw that with me in that one N of one, I don't really, it didn't change my mind. I still think the Dexcom is probably a better device overall. But last time I looked, it was 10 times and then at least still 5 times the costs of the Libre. One other comment I can't help but making is on your picture, this lady has that's obviously a 2 or a 1. It's not the 3. The 3 is a smaller device now. And she's got it on the front of her arm. I've never seen that. We always put it on the back.
And this is from the NHS website, so
Interesting.
I don't know how much of a stock image is that, and I didn't want to put the image on the belly, but they use that. They usually cover that. Insurance covers that when you are already on insulin, because they think that's the only benefit you will get from a CGM when you're monitoring your insulin um injections or with an insulin pump. But they're not seeing the benefits of having or doing prevention with a CGM. A lot of people who have a fasting glucose of 80, 70, and they don't even think that they eat something, they might get their blood glucose up to a 200,
Oh,
and they're missing from pre-diabetes just because they don't know. And a lot of people don't have the time to go to a lab to be sitting there 2 3 hours to get a craft insulin survey, and of course this is not replacing that, but it gives you a hint on how your glucose metabolism is, and which otherwise you won't know.
so interesting point. So, I was on vacation last week or 2 weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, and played a good bit of golf at Kiowa. We met some new friends. One of them, we were having a snack after the game. I played terribly, which I expected, but I still had fun. So they were asking me a little bit more about what I do, and I started, as you might imagine, getting passionate, getting geared up,
Did you
and
did you did you brought some shaky papers with you?
I actually did that once and really ticked off some new friends. I had folded up some of my shaky papers and I put them in my pocket, and we sat down for lunch, and they didn't like that. Anyway, I guess, you got to let somebody volunteer. They felt like they were a captive audience. But anyway, back to golf at Kiowa and the snack afterward. Well, the lady said, of the couple said, well, I've been having some questions about my blood sugar. And I said, well, here, let me write you a script for the freesaw. She put it on, and I asked her a little bit later, I sent her a text. She said, yeah, it was very interesting. I had this, I forgot what it was. It was some Asian rice dish, and my blood sugar went up to like 270. Kaboom. It's like, oh my gosh, I hope that was a wrong reading. If not, obviously bad news, but the lady's, gosh, in her early 30s, mid 30s. And it's like, if you've got that going on, what kind of impact does it have in terms of, what if you'd not known this for another 30 years?
Yeah, definitely. You just increased the amount of tourism on Kiwa right now. You were so hesitating last week about mentioning where your vacations were, and you just
Oops. It was one of my party that didn't want me to mention Kiowa because they said it's getting too crowded already. All these and it's true. Since we had a condo on the beach at Kiowa, right after the pandemic shut down, we a financial advisor and friend of mine said, you really ought to sell it because things are going to go really wonky for a while. Well, they went wonky, but they went in the opposite direction. All these companies started getting used to, we don't have to have people live right here in the big city like New York. They can live elsewhere and telecommute. Well, what happened is these big cities are losing people, and everybody came from New York and went to Kiowa, and the property values went up 30% in just a little over a year. And so it's like, oh, I wish I'd not sold that condo. Anyway, you're right.
Oops. And the other thing is, and going back to the CGM, I always digress. I'm sorry about that.
I do too.
We were exploring on the Medicare side. There might be a chance for Medicare to cover still for patients with type 2 diabetes without insulin therapy. Another sensor that is called Enlight, which is produced by Medtronic. We'll have to check it out yet. I think I sent you an email. You responded to that email about that. Because, as you know, even with a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, Medicare may not pay for some of these devices. So just a heads up for people with insurance. There are other devices, not as popular as Fixed Libre or Dexcom, but we're thinking about trying some of those and see what the difference are.
We really do need to do that. This space is exploding. You look at the internet, you look at other people talking about it, and it's really helping us on in the area of science understand how much more prevalent diabetes is, prediabetes. Again, there's a whole new world opening up now that we're actually looking. Now, when you look at mine, there were a couple of things that happened with me. Like I said, the first night I got woken up at midnight. But here's another thing that happened. The first night, my blood sugar went up, according to this device, about 180, 190. And yes, I'd had a few carbs. I had a few almonds with dark chocolate. I really didn't expect that kind of reaction. So my first reaction was, well, dang, I'm not as well off as I thought. And you have to have to know me as a patient to understand a little bit more of the psychology of what happened. I started the GLP-1s a little over a year ago. At that time, it was Ozempic. And I got a major overall average decrease in my glucose levels. Ozempic is and was developed primarily not as a weight loss drug, as a diabetes drug. And it's very, very good at it. In fact, it's a problem for the diabetics in the country that Ozempic has become so hard to get because it's so good at weight loss. When you do what we do, it becomes really clear why the best diabetes drug class that we've ever had also is the best drug class we've ever had for weight loss. Body fat and diabetes are just so intricately related. There's only one thing that's more tightly related to diabetes, and that's age. So anyhow, to get back to my story, yes, this thing was a frustration, but it also changed my personal treatment or therapy as a patient. Now, what I'm getting to is this. I will go on. Folks know that have listened to me a good bit know that I tend to go on medication vacations. Metformin, I'll purposefully skip a couple of days a week. I don't skip a couple of days of my blood pressure medications. I do. I don't take my. I'm on a statin because I have plaque, not because of my LDL levels. And with the statin, it's a low dose. It's 5 milligrams of rosuvastatin, or what used to be called Crestor. And I take it anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week. So I do that with most medications. I had not taken my Ozempic, and I've switched recently from Ozempic to Mounjaro. I'd not taken that for about 3, maybe 4 weeks, because I'd gotten used to this idea that my blood sugars are just doing that so much better. Well, I mean, as you'll see, I started off on this one with the Freestyle Libre 3 device, headache though it may have caused, and woke me up in the middle of the night. But it still said, hey, wait a minute. Maybe I need to be back on my medicine. Any other comments from your side, Jesus?
I think one thing that I have seen with some patients, and we have discussed this, is you are the example of what you request to your patients to do. Exercise, being on low carb, and even you have experienced and shared what the impact is on some medications on your health. And right now, GLP-1s seem to have a really big impact on you. But even when you are doing the right thing, most of the time, you can see your blood glucose trending between 100 and 150.
Right.
And when you get, and let's say you get an OGTT, you might get also to higher levels during the OGTT. And that the stuff that you're doing is not taking. It's not like solving the issue and saying, okay, now you can eat all the carbs you want.
Right.
By staying on low carb, you are just stopping the process of damaging your own vessels and avoiding complications that if you return to carbs, that risk factor is going to come back. So it's part of the understanding and accepting that when you start on this route or being on a better shape and eating healthier, is you say this way. It's not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's a lifestyle change for the rest of your life.
Permanent change, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the overall numbers, and so in all of the Freestyle Libre, they have patterns that you can start providing. One of the things that we just had on an email, one of our patients just emailed us and said, can you give me your practice? What was the number? There were a couple of digits there. Do you remember that? It was like an ERO number or something.
I don't remember.
So you'll see it over the next day or two. And what they're doing is they're saying, look, if you'd like to share your data with your medical provider, give us that medical provider's blank, blank, blank number. We don't have one of those. We're going to be looking to get one, but patients have shared with us a lot, just like I shared with you. I just did it from doing screenshots. So that's another thing to be aware of. As you mentioned,
We have a
go ahead.
platform for that. We have a platform for that, and to our patients, we just had to update that because we changed emails and everything. But we have there's a Freestyle Libre platform. We have provider account, and we can invite patients to share the data with us. Some patients do. Some patients like to send screenshots instead.
Very good. So a couple of other things. You pointed out that we started to get more of my long-term numbers here, and this graph on the left starts to show that. And then you see it's 15 through the 21st, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So 7 days. And it shows us our median or mean. That's the white line. I think it's one standard deviation is the brighter image, and then the lighter image, I think, is 2 standard deviations. So as you see, I never really got up to 200. I'm watching my lifestyle, as Jesus mentioned. And by the way, I'm starting a little series on the exercises that we're doing. I'm putting those on the shorts, YouTube shorts, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And we will probably go back and consolidate that and cover that on maybe one of the long form shows for here. So anyhow, no, I'm not getting. I did get up to that 180 with those almonds that very first time. Now, I still am skeptical of this number, and you'll find sometimes I've found this in the past. A reader, a sensor that appeared to be just run a little bit high. And one of the other reasons why I think this might be the case is, as you can see on here, I never really went below about 80 at night. And usually I'm almost always gotten down into the 60s between midnight and 6 a.m. That's like blood pressure. We tend to see what we call a diurnal change in glucose management or glucose levels, where we do hit a peak, usually associated with meals during the day, and we hit a trough between midnight and 6 a.m. With the Freestyle Libre, you begin to wonder, okay, how much of this is due to what's called the choo-choo effect? And how much of this is due to your actual blood sugar dropping? What I'm referring to with the choo-choo effect is that these CGMs aren't in capillary blood. They're in extracellular fluid. So there's a little bit of a transition from one to the other. I get back to that same theme, though, even though I had some suspicion about this number. I thought it might be maybe 10 high on average. And here's another thing. I mean, I'm a human being. I knew I coulda, woulda, shoulda gotten a finger stick device and just checked it. I never got around to it. I've got a lot of stuff going on in my life right now, and just did not get around to it. However, I did go back and take my medicine. So as you see, maybe I did get down to 60 once. It didn't show on there, but I don't know. Maybe those numbers were accurate. One of the things that hit me, though, was I continued to have more swings than I was used to having. I also had ice cream on Thursday evening. I've already done a show, actually multiple shows, and giving myself up. I'm a sweets addict. I was born in the deep south of the United States, the land of sweet tea, grits, and blackberry cobbler, blackberry pie, which is full of sugar, with ice cream on top, which is also full of sugar. So for those of you who are interested in that and have an issue, one of the biggest things that happened to me, the two biggest things that happened to me in terms of managing that sweets addiction were, number one, Um, just going low carb and staying there. That helped. Number two, uh, a supplement called Gymnema. It's an old Ayurvedic supplement. The term Gymnema sylvestre means sugar killer. Now there's a unique twist to Gymnema in terms of trying to manage your sweets addiction. That twist is most Gymnema comes in the form of a pill. You're never going to really impact so much your sweets addiction just by using that. Either split the pill up and gargle with the powder, or you can get the powder itself outside of a pill from Amazon. That's what I do. I've put it in morning smoothies, coffee, things like that. And it's very interesting what that does. Gymnema sylvestre biologically and molecularly looks enough like sugar that it goes to the sweets receptors on the back of your palate, the roof of your mouth, the tongue, the palate, where you sense sweets, and it replaces sugar. And when you eat or drink something sweet, you just don't taste it. One of the more interesting things I found was I used to be addicted to Diet Cokes, and just because of that sweetness, I would do a long 3 or 4 hour run and come in and drink multiple Diet Cokes instead of water. Again, not a very healthy thing. I had heard people mention that, oh, I don't like Diet Cokes. They taste metallic to me. I couldn't imagine that. Well, I tried this Gymnema sylvestre and then tasted some Diet Coke. Then I realized all these people and why it tasted like metal to them. Just a very, very interesting experience. And that day, my sweets addiction took a major, major hit.
I can relate to that. I'm getting off from that diet Coke thing. I think even us as physicians, I can tell you, and I've been learning more on this space in the last 2 years than what I knew about that before that. Um, we sometimes see kind of the trade-off on saying, well, at least it's not regular soda,
Right.
and I know it's not the best, but it's not the worst. And then you get stuck on that trend of diet sodas for a while, just hesitantly going into water. And one thing I don't think we have covered that. There's a research, it's not so new, about how diet soda and some sweeteners can stimulate some parts of the brain and make the brain think that you're still eating sugar and
Yeah.
stimulate an insulin secretion. So even that, the aspartame stuff, diet sodas are not the solution. So and I can relate to that. I used to drink a lot of diet cola as well, and I've been replacing that. I think last diet cola I had like 1 month ago, but I used to have one at least 3 times a week.
Yeah. I used to have a lot more, and I'm continuing to make that transition. I have some in the house, and it's interesting. I haven't had one in maybe over a month, and so this is a health channel. We talk about prevention. There's a lot of people listening who are just getting their pitchfork and torch when they start hearing me talk about drinking Diet Coke. At the end of the day, you're constantly weighing risks and benefits, and foods and sweets are an addiction. Food is an addiction that's a little bit different from other addictions like alcohol and cocaine. You can go cold turkey and just never have alcohol or cocaine again. You can't go cold turkey and never have food again. Now, you can never have carbs again. You can never have sweets again. I realize that. But again, we're talking about addictions. We're also talking about toxicology. And I remember back 30 years ago, when I was at Hopkins, some of the very first information started coming out about saccharin. Saccharin had been a big deal for diabetics. And what they had discovered was that saccharin was causing bladder cancer in mice. Well, again, we were the epidemiologist crowd. We were looking hard at those statistics. And here's where they came out. Yes, the saccharin did cause bladder cancer in mice. However, they didn't see that strong signal in humans at the time. And I'm not sure, I don't think they ever have. And here's probably one of the reasons. It might cause bladder cancer in humans. However, if humans were to consume enough of the same dose proportional to what was causing bladder cancer in mice, we'd have to have a pickup truck load full of saccharin every day. There's just nobody that could do that, even if they tried. So that whole thing becomes a continued issue of toxicology. The dose makes the poison, and people and their, failure to weigh true benefits versus risks. So, yes, I mean, I will acknowledge I should not have ever had any type of sugar substitute, but I'll also acknowledge, I should not have grown up in an environment where we were drinking sweet tea 6 and 8 times a day, and just gorging on carbs 6, 8, 10 times a day. Anyhow, we're digressing. Here's a couple of other slides which show something that happened. I mentioned earlier on that even though I was a little bit skeptical of the numbers, the swings made me nervous, and they were more than the swings I had gotten used to since I had had significant improvements of my diabetes. So I did break down. I went back and took my dose of Mounjaro. It took about 3 days, but as you can see, after about 3 or 4 days, things started calming down again. And guess what happened? I started sleeping better. I started dreaming harder, and that blood sugar continued to stabilize. I raised the issue. It was like so I took my first dose of Ozempic a couple of years ago, and it was at 11 o'clock at night. Didn't notice anything different that night. But the next night, I actually started sleepwalking again. I did that a lot as a teenager, but I had not done that since then. And I covered that. I've mentioned it several times. I've had a couple of patients mention that to me as well, that I just didn't understand why I was sleeping so much better. I had some suspicion that it may have been better glucose control and not hitting some of these lower numbers at night, maybe not hitting higher numbers. I just don't know. But these numbers, this pattern makes me begin to go back and suspect maybe the better control of glucose is helping me sleep better. But I definitely sleep better on a GLP-1. Other comments?
No, I think it's clear enough.
Continued stability, continued better sleep. I had 2 servings of grits. Again, I was on vacation at the beautiful island that will not be named. My blood sugar went up to 120. So again, more of that same pattern. I've never had the dawn effect. I suspect this device is running a little bit high. It's yet another reason why I suspect the blood sugars that are reflected on this might be a little bit higher than actual. Again, despite that suspicion, despite some of the headaches of getting woken up, it changed my health behaviors. So Yeah, the alarms. So there are 4 alarms now on the new Libre 3. And here's one of the things we're thinking about doing. Um, Going back, and for a lot of our patients, they're having more headaches with the Libre 3. Didn't have as many with the Libre 2, so we're going back and tending to write the 2 more often, and just giving Abbott a little bit more time to continue to develop that 3. Here's one thing that please don't do. I've had 2 patients tell me, yeah, my blood sugar, what made the alarm go off? It went so low and it woke me up at 3 in the morning. So I went downstairs and ate a bunch of Oreos. It's like, oh gosh, don't do that. I mean, if you were on insulin, that would be an appropriate thing, but not for somebody who's controlling their blood sugar with lifestyle, and even with the newer medications, the GLP-1s, the SGLT2s. These medicines are just not causing hypoglycemic episodes the way insulin does. They're not dangerous like insulin. Insulin is dangerous. These are not. And lifestyle clearly is not. So you can turn off all of the 4 alarms on the new Libre 3. You can turn off all but one. That one is the low blood sugar number. You can't adjust it either. So it's like, for those of us who are not taking insulin, what do? Do we just let it, and we are fat adapted. So what do? Do we just let it alarm? No. Here's the thing. You disconnect the Bluetooth when you go to bed at night and reconnect it in the morning. I'm sorry, I know that's a headache, but again, that's another one of those things where this stuff can be a headache. It's designed for people that are way beyond the prevention mode that we're in. So you got to adapt.
And I can understand the reasoning behind that. If you have people who are on insulin therapy and they're kind of building these devices for those people, they're really on risk of having what we call a insulin shock or diabetes type of shock with very low levels of blood glucose because of an excessive dose of insulin on that during the night or afternoon.
Yeah.
And it might save lives for those folks, but on our side on prevention we're very likely not wanting people to get to a point where they need to get insulin injections.
Yeah. If it's insulin injection that's causing that blood sugar to go down to 60 and 50, there's absolutely no way to know that it's not going to hit the 20s and start causing and start the patient having a seizure or even dying. So there's plenty of good reason for that. You just wish that they would open up and make things a little bit easier for those of us in the prevention community. Now, when I when I started thinking more about maybe I'm sleeping better because my blood sugar is in better control, that reminded me of the Samoji effect. So, Jesus, you want to talk a little bit about who Dr. Samoji was and what the Samoji effect is and how it might or might not relate to the dawn phenomenon?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I think I reviewed that on med school and I just forgot and about the history. But Dr. Somogy was an Hungarian doctor, and he described the paradoxical tendency of the body to react to low glucose with compensatory mechanisms based on adrenaline, corticosteroids like cortisol, growth hormone, and glucagon. But it's an overreaction, actually. The body sees very low levels of blood glucose, triggers all these mechanisms, and brings the blood glucose higher than the normal or adequate values as a compensation mechanism. There's still debate because after the invention of CGM, all of this was kind of a theoretical and some evidence here and there, but there were not the exact devices or mechanisms to make adequate measurements of this. It was more complicated. With CGM, there are people that are saying that this emoji effect actually does not exist. I think that's still debatable. But one thing to see the difference with is the dawn phenomenon, which is very similar. Both of them are morning elevated blood glucose. Both of them might have intervention of cortisol as part of the cause. But the down phenomenon is believed to be caused by low insulin at night, and then high insulin antagonist hormones might increase uh, blood glucose levels. Now, the other key difference is down phenomenon is not related to low blood glucose levels during the night.
So,
So both of those may explain high levels of blood glucose early morning.
yeah. So now, why would me sleeping better when my blood sugar is better controlled? Why would that remind me of the Samoji effect?
No, sure. Wanna explain further?
So with the Samoji effect, what he was saying is, look, you get lower blood sugar, and then you start getting this reaction with adrenaline, mostly corticosteroids. Uh, your cortisol increases, and it's hard to sleep when you've got adrenaline
Hmm.
flowing in your veins. That was the point.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, ready to get into Q&A?
I had one comment. It's slightly related to all this stuff. When you mention grids, can you explain further what grids are? I already looked it up, but maybe people know better than me. It's the first time that I heard about that.
On a technical basis, we're getting some blurring with you today.
Oh,
But
that's on purpose. It's my
is that right?
I had some stuff right here that it's okay. I can share later what it says, but it's not
Okay.
important. More important right now.
So grits, it's an interesting question. I was having a conversation with somebody, and I saw this video long, long ago, and it actually won a lot of awards. It was basically somebody showing how grits are made. It's made out of corn and a thing called hominy, HOMIN, hominy, yeah, NY. The reason the video won awards was it comes down to a very poor Depression era house in the Southeast, deep South. People had no shoes. They had a blue tick hound on the the clapboard house out in the woods, and they were basically pouring the lye onto the corn to make the hominy, and then crushing it in a crusher to make the grits. Anyhow, it was showing. It was supposed to be a how-to, but it turned into more of what's this culture like. Anyway, maybe too many bunny holes here. The bottom line is that grits are made from corn. They're a grain product, therefore, and a high carb grain product. They are harder to digest than corn. And so they have less of a glycemic impact than things like white rice. Obviously, corn is like deadly in terms of glycemic value, but they still do have a fairly high glycemic value. A lot of people compare them to cream of wheat, which is a dish probably more similar to grits than anything. One of the reasons that grits are a southern United States dish was, again, back in the Depression era, grits were cheap as dirt.
Yeah, and when I made a quick Google search for that, and it caught my eye that they use something similar to the nixtamalization process. Have you heard of that about that?
No, nixtamalization?
Nixtamalization. That's
No.
something invented in Mexico.
Yeah, it
The
sounds like
now
it. Sounds
Nahuatl
like tamale.
culture made that, and that's the right now when you have tortillas done, there are machines that do that. But in the early
Right.
days, and I can relate because my grandmother used to do that, and I used to help her when I was a child. Uh, you get the corn, you take out all the pieces of that, and you put that on boiling water, and you add some cal powder to it. So it
What
makes
powder?
cal powder, calcium powder. I'm sorry, calcium,
Calcium?
calcium
Oh,
powder,
interesting.
and it helps to take out all the fibrous capes of layers outside the corn, make it more uh, bland, more soft.
Hmm.
So then you can just uh, like what's the word for that? Like
Grind.
yeah, you grind all of that, and then you can make all the stuff that you do with tortillas and all the other stuff. But it's interesting because when you mentioned grain, and I saw that, it's like, oh, they're not so far away from the process that we used for Mexico about corn. And
Yeah.
yes, corn
Yeah.
is very high on carbs. So
It's interesting. You and I've talked a couple of times about making some Spanish speaking videos and reaching out to the Spanish speaking community. I was in San Antonio, lived there about half time for about 3 years, setting up the Toyota medical plant. And it's big deal with prediabetes and diabetes metabolic syndrome. It was, as it was known at the time, with the Spanish speaking community. And you wonder, okay, how much of this is gene pool? There's clearly a gene pool in several gene pools there, but it's you don't look like I do. And I look like lily white, and you're dark. So there's different genes, but by far the bigger issue, I don't think it's genetics. I think it's mostly culture, because so much of the uh, Spanish speaking community diet is just corn related.
yeah,
Corn or wheat?
heavily based on corn, and I can tell you from a culture's perspective, the you might not see this more often on higher socioeconomical stratus right now, but the main bulge of people in Mexico cannot stand eating without tortillas. We
Yeah,
turn anything into a taco. So
exactly.
yeah,
Can you imagine eating Mexican street food without corn?
I get all the strange look whenever I'm eating anything with just a spoon.
With just a what?
With
A
just a
spoon?
spoon. They're
Yeah.
like, aren't you eating some tortillas? No, I'm not. You're not Mexican then. Okay.
That's a big issue.
Yeah.
Big issue. So anyhow, are you ready to go for the transition?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Additional
No, I think
digression. Let's go.
it's a
Let's go
good
ahead.
point. Science, it's so funny. I'm trying to get away from this. As you know, you're seeing patients with me in terms. You're the scribe and quality person, and even at this point, if you've heard it once, you've heard it 1,000 times. Okay, Dr. Brewer, you just went through a whole bunch of science geekiness. What should I do? What do I do with all that? And so we're
Don't
trying
eat
to get a little bit.
tortillas. That's
Yeah.
that's that's advice. Don't eat tortillas.
Okay, Gilbert, if you'll give us the transition, we'll go into Q&A. So, Jesus, I'm going to try again to relinquish control to you.
We're gonna try. With this membership thing. That let me tell you, it's helping a lot. I know that it might not seem like it. I know it's just a couple of bucks, but those help a lot because, as you know, we have a team on the Philippines. We are expanding our team for care, and I'm in Mexico right now. So it goes a long way. So thank you to Wayne Carlisle for becoming a new YouTube member for the channel. And let me see the another one. Tree Lady as well. And RJ, who sent us a $2 super chat and is asking, why did you switch from Ozempic?
Oh, that's a good question. It reminds me of the Willie Sutton rule. He was a bank robber, and they caught him, and somebody asked him, well, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. I mean, why did I switch from Ozempic? because there wasn't any available. Now, I really enjoyed Ozempic because I stayed on the half dose of Ozempic. You can't do that. Well, you can't control your dose with the other ones. However, what you can do with Mounjaro is that you can get your doc to prescribe the half dose and just stay on the half dose that way. I've got a lot of patients that do that. One of the more common side effect problems that we see, we've had 2 people stop, maybe 3, and correct me, Jesus, I may be wrong. We've had a few people stop their Ozempic simply because they're having too many GI side effects. That's one of the most common problems. I did that once too. I was going out on a week hike in Jackson Hole and Yellowstone Park, and I was doing well, and I was going with a group of friends and patients. And I thought, you know what? I'm used to this. I should go ahead and increase my dose of Ozempic. Oh, big mistake. Just stomach rumbling, having to run to the bathroom like multiple times. And this was on the airplane flight. So the GI stuff is an issue. The GI stuff was not why I switched from Ozempic, because I was fine as long as I stayed on the half dose. I just couldn't get it in my area. So we could get Mounjaro, so we took that. Another comparison point and another bunny hole on that is Mounjaro is like the next generation. It does appear to have fewer side effects. These first generations are called incretins because of the science. Well, it gets into the science and the detail of how these medicines work. And if somebody has an interest, we can talk about that. We've talked about it before. Mounjaro is not an incretin. It's called a twincretin because it has 2 completely different incretin effects. And it's not clear at all, at least to me, why it has fewer gastrointestinal side effects. Any other comments, Jesus?
No, nothing to add. I think availability, it's important. I was just gonna say that, and I'll relate to my previous comment when we discussed the Ozempic shortage on Mexico, and I think the U.S. All of that was news, and they were like, "Why all these people with obesity? I just taking all this medication, life-saving medication from people with diabetes," and it was like, "Well, maybe they do have diabetes. They just don't know it." And I can tell you,
Really?
I was looking at prices because I wanted to. I'm getting a new CGM for one of my relatives, and I was comparing that to Ozempic, and I think the CGM Freestyle Libre 3 is actually more expensive in Mexico. It's like $200.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but
More
Ozempic,
expensive than the Libre 2?
I was looking at the 3. I didn't see the 2. And the Ozempic is like $250 in Mexico.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
and
And we do have a couple of patients that go to Mexico to get their Ozempic.
you don't need prescriptions.
Really?
You don't need prescription in Mexico. I mean,
You don't need prescription for anything, really.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. You only need
Yeah, I
prescriptions
know. I'm not
for
either.
antibiotics and controlled substances for treating severe cases, because not even Prozac needs prescriptions. But I'm digressing.
That is an interesting digression.
Okay, and I was going to say something else. Well, I might remember later. Let's go to the questions then. I'm gonna go through the good days first. The good morning messages from RJ, T-Bone.
Joe Riley actually appeared on the channel for us. He shared he's one of these folks that's got both 2 things, FH and LP(a), and both of them very high levels. But Joe just keeps cooking right along.
It's good to see your name over here, Joe.
Yeah.
Jim Langendon, nice seeing you. Dave the retired cop. He's a usual one on the channel as well. Thank you so much for following up. Greg Bastones. The ones that you see with the logo in it, they're YouTube members. So thank you so much for that as well. Elizabeth Pan, Kirk T.
Now, which ones are the YouTube members? The ones with the little
Yeah,
YouTube
here,
insignia?
like Elizabeth.
Oh,
Yeah,
great. Excellent. Thank you so much.
that's why I can track from some of those messages. And Kirk T. So those are actually the good mornings. And RJ, he's talking about a huge development. I think he sent this when we were discussing when you were discussing the Lumen device.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Now, did you cover this one, Melissa? Also a member?
Oh no, she's not a member, but we can discuss that. I have a
Oh,
high
she's not?
LPLA, yeah, but Melissa is a usual one as well. I have a high
Huh.
LPLA, 375, and my 26-year-old son just got tested. It was 316. I think it's the arsonists, not the firefighters. We have discussed that a couple of times, right? And I think
Right.
we presented a slide that a member sent to us. I don't remember who did, and they were showing a 1990s study where they said, well, here's the evidence that LP is a firefighter. And it was based on having on a sample of tissue elevated levels of LP on the healing process of that injured tissue.
Hmm.
But even they said that it had some prothrombotic effects, meaning it can cause clots. So uh, I was yet still hesitating about that. I don't think we have enough evidence yet, but we're leaning more towards thinking that LP is a firefighter rather than the arsonist.
And that's what I wrote for you. Now, it's interesting, Jesus. I cannot see the difference between Melissa's label and someone else's. So there's something you're seeing that I'm not that shows members.
Hmm. It's just the icon. But I don't know if
The
you're on a
little
guest.
YouTube icon.
Yeah, like this one that RJ has over here.
Well, on mine, Melissa's has the YouTube icon right down in the
Oh,
lower
no,
right corner.
see, just right to the name. It's
Oh, well,
it's
see,
kind
I
of a
don't
disc,
have that.
kind of a disc.
Oh, okay. Is that it?
Yeah, I don't know how to point that out for you.
Oh, is
It's
that it?
RJ on, yeah, the one that it looks like a
Oh,
circle and
okay.
an S in it.
So Kirk T does not have one.
Yes, exactly right.
Okay, now I got it. I'm one of those old guys.
No, it was a learning process for me as well. No worries. So RJ is asking if you compared your lumen readings to your blood readings.
It's a great question, and I admitted it later in the presentation, RJ. I coulda, woulda, shoulda done a finger stick blood test, and I didn't. That was immediately obvious. Like I said, I got a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. I won't even go into the personal stuff associated with the move and separation, things like that. But the Alabama project is still, we had it in transition for a long time. It's being managed by a great company who purchased most of it, but I'm still a major equity owner there and have to get involved. The biggest thing by far is like I said, I think I said this, I think we've tripled and then tripled again our volume coming into to the company here, our channel practice. So I am so busy. I saw that information. I reacted quickly. I started taking my medicine again, but I did not go get a finger stick device. I'm going to go get another Freestyle Libre. I'll get the 2 this time because I'm more comfortable with it. And just check again, and I'll let you know.
Let's see if we can try the other one, the Enlight from Medtronic, to see if
Yeah,
that's an
that's a
option
good
for
idea.
patients as well, especially those patients where Medicare won't pay for the Freestyle Libre.
Does the
Uh,
Enlight require a prescription?
a prescription, yes, but not prior authorization,
Okay.
apparently.
Well, let's write me a prescription, and I'll go try the Enlight.
Melissa just became a YouTube member, and again, I'm sorry, I don't want to get under anyone's skin. We're just trying to find a way to get to the most messages possible because we always have a big line of questions, and we are not able to address all of them. So it's we're just trying new stuff, you know. Uh,
Hey, sis, it was a great idea. I'm sure this is YouTube. I'm sure somebody's going to complain that you did it, But the bottom line is, it is, we have to triage these questions now because we're getting so many. And you know what? Your idea of doing it for members first is great.
And we do go into a lot of bunny holes, so
Yeah.
that takes some time to answer questions. RJ says that he is excited to go into the medical route, so appreciate that. And Rick Folia, for FYI, Meridian Labs no longer does the at-home blood spot craft test. They now provide a box with all the vials you take to a lab and mail back. They're working on a new version on the spot test. I don't know. I have never heard about that. I'm not so familiar with it.
Oh, I
Are
am.
you?
I can respond to it. I've done the Meridian. So Meridian Valley Labs is one of the few labs that publicly offers the craft insulin survey. Craft is different from what you and I do with our patients in this practice. The protocol for what we do is 75 grams of glucose, 3 glucose levels, and 0, 1, and 2, fasting 1 and 2 hours. Craft was 100 grams of glucose and 4 or 5 blood sugars, fasting half hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, and 3 hours. So 5. And they did it with a blood spot. So you would do speaking of finger sticks, you do a finger stick. They'd give you 5 or 6 little, you remember in labs, we used to have a thing called filter paper. It was white. This is very similar to that filter paper. You'd drop your drops of blood at that time period. Then you'd mail that in. And it's called blood spot testing mechanisms. So that's what Rick's talking about. That Meridian Valley Lab is something that a lot of our patients have done. They ask us to set it up for them, and then we would interpret it for them. It's interesting to hear that they're getting away from the blood spot and now doing that vials. Very interesting information, Rick. Thanks for sharing.
RJ is asking if we are ever going to start a dating service. I don't think so. I am a relationship coach, but I don't think PrevMed is going to go into that route.
Well, hey, sis, I never knew you were a relationship coach. Talk
I,
about
I
hidden
think I think you
information.
forgot. I think you forgot. We discussed that like months
I
ago,
don't
but it was
know.
a brief discussion.
I noticed that, I'm still stuttering and stammering around on anything that has to do with men's health, ED, relationships, and sex. And you just dove right in there. And I thought, dang, this guy talks like a pro. Now I know you are one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, have you heard that saying of that who only knows medicine doesn't even know about medicine? So just trying to expand my horizons a little bit. You
Okay.
haven't heard about that before?
I haven't. It took me, as you could tell, it took me a second to get through that. But yes, I was anti against that too. My roommate in med school was a guy that sat in his room 20 hours a day studying, and he was super nerd, super geeky in terms of just not understanding anything about the rest of life and relationships and stuff like that. And it's like, it's really hard to be a good doctor if you don't understand if you don't participate in life.
Take a look at The Good Doctor. Have you seen that series? I haven't watched a couple of episodes only. It's an autistic doctor, and granted it's part of his issue, but even autistic people on the screen, they're trying to get them into more involved with the social involvement
Right.
because it's part of the health. Humans are a social being, and that's critical as well.
It really
Obviously,
is. And I have seen that series. It's very good, very funny. And um, as you said, it's about somebody with autism spectrum disorder. And it really helps you begin to understand that specific condition as well, and the challenges that those folks have to overcome in terms of relationships.
yep. RJ, the problem with CGMs is the lack of accuracy hitting one trends, and we discussed that. And there's a lack of it's not as accurate as a blood test or even a finger stick, but it gives you a perspective. Rick Foley, I love my Libre 3. I turn up the Bluetooth at night so those damn alarms don't wake me up. Yeah, just like Dr. Brewer suggested. Melissa, if you manage every other risk factor, will LP still cause heart disease though? Good question. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dr. Brewer?
Well, as I showed on here, I responded to hers and said, whether it's the art. Well, first of all, I used to think it was the arsonists, and as you and I, as you know, I've started to do some transition, especially more recently, in that maybe it's not the arsonist. Um, and we've talked about it a couple of times. If you want, you might want to add that to our queue to go back deeper into that issue. So on one side of that argument, we're we are, like many people, feeling less and less like LDL is the arsonist. And when you think about it, LP little a is just a genetic variation of LDL. Now, it does, when molecularly, it does have those Kringle repeat hooks on the LP little a that LDL doesn't have. It's a repeating amino acid pattern, and it can create a little hook coming off of the LDL particle. Now, you could say, well, maybe that is inflammatory in and of itself. The other thing about LP little a is that it also molecularly attracts oxidized small dense LDL. Well, we all know that oxidized small dense LDL is inflammatory. So at least, you've got some things on both sides of the fence. The fact that it's just a variation of LDL, and if you believe that LDL is not the arsonist, that may lead you towards thinking that maybe it's not the arsonist. On the other hand, these other two components, the involving the Kringle hook, the hook with the Kringle repeats, that may make you think, well, maybe it is a little bit more of the arsonist. The bottom line is nobody knows yet. But the response that I had given Melissa earlier was, yep, that's all theory and that's all helpful. The real question gets back to what we said a minute ago. What do we do? And the bottom line is we manage our other risk factors. So here's one thing that you will see among LP(a) patients that you don't see among others, and that is calcification of the aortic valve. But that's only in patients that have numbers like 500 and above. You see that there's a French-Canadian gene pool that tends to have prevalence of that LP(a) that gets up to that level, and you see that some of that there. I've never seen it in the typical garden variety LP(a)s, most of which are between 50 and 200. Now, does it cause heart disease though? Again, it's this whole issue of causality is a nightmare. Jesus is over there nodding when I use that term. Causality is a big, big issue in epidemiology. And the bottom line is we don't know which causes which. We do not. It's very similar to this issue of gum disease, diabetes, and heart disease. The Bale-Deneen community says it over and over and over again. Tooth disease, gum disease causes heart attacks. They've actually generated some valid scientific evidence that that's true. And I don't argue with that. However, again, this causality issue can be such a nightmare. I am completely, just from what I've done in terms of research and epidemiology, I think 90% of this connection between gum disease and heart disease is diabetes, causing both gum disease and heart disease, not that the gum disease is causing the heart disease. Sorry, I know that was another little bunny hole associated with the issue of causality, but Melissa, causality is a nightmare for those of us who study the science.
There's a thing you might be familiar with that because it's very big in occupational medicine. The Bradford Hill criteria. It's
No, I'm not
around
familiar.
it's around 7 to, I believe it's 7, 8 different aspects that help you identify causality. And the only one that is critical is temporality, meaning
Temporality. Yeah.
one thing starts before the other.
Yeah.
With LPLA, we don't want to know. I don't think we
Yeah.
want to, at least in our patients, we don't want to know. I mean, we want to cover all bases. And if you have
Right.
high LPLA,
We don't want to do
we want to make
experiments
sure
on
that,
our
yeah,
patients.
exactly. We want to make sure that you don't get into a heart attack.
Right.
Some people have seen that, like Bob Harper, the example that you have provided, the Biggest Loser guy, that apparently had everything okay, but LPLA, and had a heart attack. But he found out about the LPLA after the heart attack. So how do we know which amount of these people who have high LPLA are actually ending with a heart attack? At least on our population, we don't want to know.
I think you went on mute.
No, I just, I just,
Okay, good.
I just finished
There we
talking.
go. There we go.
Okay. Um, and Melissa, I'm not diabetic, but just a CGM monitor with certain foods were doing to my sugar. The highest I got was 150, then would go back to 90s. Is that too much of a surge? I think I know that you have an opinion on that about the
I
140.
do. And I got it from Blood Sugar 101 by, oh, what is her name? Maybe you can look that up while
I-
I'm
I'll,
describing
I'll,
it.
go- I'll go ahead. Yeah,
Jenny, what is it? Anyway, Blood Sugar 101. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, it's really good. It's a book that was written by a lady that's a diabetic. She's not
Jenny
a
Jenny
Jenny
Rule.
Rule, Ruhl. And she's got an award-winning website called Blood Sugar 101. And she has gone through a lot of the science, a lot of the evidence, and it's got a great couple of chapters on at what point does the blood sugar start to do damage. And um, her opinion after going through the evidence was 140. The more time you spend under the curve of 140 or greater, then the more time you're doing damage, which can lead to inflammation, damage of the glycocalyx, softening of that plaque, and risk for heart attack and stroke. And I think that's a pretty good number. So, I get these 150s, 180s that you saw on the graphs earlier. I'm still not too worried about them because, as you could see, they were lasting half an hour, and I was back below 140 in less than half an hour. The real dangers come to these folks that have, as Jesus mentioned, all these obese folks taking Ozempic away from diabetics. Maybe they were diabetics too. 90% of diabetics are not diagnosed. And when you think about, okay, they're eating a Big Mac and a large fries and a large Coke for lunch and then dinner, these people are having blood sugars 180, 200, 250, 300 for 8, 10, 15 hours a day. That is killing. And then they wonder why they have a heart attack in their 60s. That's what this channel is all about, trying to get that information out there, trying to help the people that are aware, that are listening, that are doing better, helping them out. Because we want to get to an average life expectancy. Once you get the actuarials these days will tell you, once you're my age, you're probably have a life expectancy up into the 90s. I'm dead serious. Our goal is to get it into the 120s.
Yeah, and it might sound like overreach to a lot of people, but it's just because we're very used to see people on their 40s and 50s having a heart attacks and dying before the 70s.
Right.
And it's a lot of a lifestyle component on there. And I will say that this is why we're using CGM for prevention, because otherwise you won't notice. You will have an annual check with blood glucose below 100, and everybody's going to tell you that you're okay. And even if you get an insulin, on fasting insulin, it's going to go okay. And then you do an OMA high R, and that is based on fasting insulin, and it's going to go okay. And there's no way to know if you are dealing with carb metabolism issues if you're not see the full moving picture. Like the example that you like to give about standing in front of a bus. A
Yeah.
picture will be different than a video.
Absolutely.
All right.
Somebody made the comment that the Libre 3 was too chatty, or that the current Libre 3 app is too chatty, meaning it's too quick to send an alarm. I would agree. It's just way too quick. They're going to have to clean that up before this thing gets popular.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, technology, it has its challenges. You open up with that phrase, so that's for sure. RJ had an opinion about Melissa's blood glucose, and we mostly agree. You don't want to have regular levels over 140. Let me see what else we'll have. We have a lot. We have a lot of on our RJs. I appreciate that you are having a lot of interaction. See here, another one from Melissa. What is a healthy glucose spike if you're not a diabetic? Do you always want to stay around no higher than a 30-point surge?
Yeah, I don't think it's a 30-point surge when you started from 90 is not a big deal. And we see that all the time, even with low carb meals. People go from 90 to 120. It's the time under the curve, or the time that you spend over 140 appears to be the inflammatory trigger, not how much you go up and down.
And Freedom 20, we have two related questions. To purchase the Libre, do you need a prescription? And Paul Reisbach, why do CGMs require a prescription? So it's part of the question and an answer. On the US, yes, you need a prescription. Why? I'll let that to Dr. Brewer.
Because because they can. You know, I don't know. I really do not know what the FDA's logic is on requiring a prescription for this device. I know that, again, they keep thinking that the device is only for people on severe, significant insulin treatment. You know, and here's one thing I would say about that is, yes, if you are taking insulin, you do not want to use this number alone as, when you take insulin or how much insulin you take. I think that is the danger that they're talking about, but I don't know. I don't think they should. Of course, I also think they should make metformin over the counter and aspirin a prescription drug, just because of the amount of damage that each of those causes. Metformin, not so much, like they think. And baby aspirin, aspirin causes bleeding.
Yep. RJ, Nikki's Swedish style ice cream isn't bad substitute for ice cream, very low calories too. Have you heard of that?
No, I've used Halo ice cream. I've used several other low carb ice creams, but I haven't heard of Nikki's Swedish style. I got to check that out.
Okay. And those are basically the YouTube member comments. This is one that I wanted just to highlight from Elisa. Happy to support your cause. It has helped me tremendously. I got the CMT because of your info. I learned so much about self-black. Explains why I had my last July calcium score 23. Deceiving.
Oh, that MI is MI. Had a myocardial infarction last July.
Yeah. I didn't see it like, and I just my Spanish brain mixed that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And she's commenting if maybe low dose aspirin will be a bad idea for people with Lp(a). And you don't prescribe that for Lp(a).
What we prescribe it for is plaque. The minute we know that you have plaque, we don't prescribe statins for if you don't have plaque. We don't prescribe baby aspirin if you don't have plaque. And in fact, this whole baby aspirin indication is, like everything else, it's a whole story. A few years ago, I never recommended baby aspirin. Well, not in the past decade or two, but you saw standards committees recommending it starting at usually at age 55, and they called it primary prevention. They changed their recommendation from what they were doing age-based to what I'm doing, and that is if you have plaque. And unfortunately, the lay press, New York Times and others, all they reported is the standards committees dropped their recommendation for baby aspirin. And that's a big problem. So many people with plaque, cardiovascular disease, that should be taking baby aspirin are not doing it as a result of bad reporting. Now, I don't recommend it for LP(a) unless you have plaque. So if you have plaque, I recommend it.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. And usually for LPLA, we do recommend niacin. That has has been seen to improve a lot LPLA levels, but mostly helping increase your HDL and decreasing inflammation. Leah Craft, I just started my freestyle Libre. I ruined the first one because I swam laps with it. Apparently, it can't withstand the water for more than 30 minutes at a time.
Leah, I've had one on in the water for over an hour. It just depends.
Yeah,
But again,
some sensors are defective, right?
yeah, there's
And
clearly a quality control issue with these things.
yeah, and yeah, Maximus has the same opinion, and I know it must be frustrating if you're paying out of pocket for the sensor that's $70 or a little bit more than that, and it's just defective. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, be aware. I'm glad you brought that up because I've had so many patients. I did not know this. I had one defective one in the past and just, burned it, threw it away and used another one. I didn't think to call the company. If you call or write the company, they're very liberal about giving you a free replacement.
I think RJ is saying that right there. Some of them have failed in the shower, and he called and they replaced it.
Yep, exactly right.
And I find out another thing. If you go to the Freestyle Libre page from who are they? Are Abbott? I think it's Abbott, right?
Abbott? Yes, Abbott, ABBOT.
I talked to them a few weeks back, and they mentioned that they do have a free sample for 14 days
Oh, really?
for almost anyone, E- everyone but Medicare patients. Because I was looking for one for a Medicare patient, and they say, "Oh, we don't do that for Medicare patients." I don't know why. I don't know if that's a regulation issue.
Well, I didn't know this, but I've got a patient starting in 18 minutes, and I haven't had lunch, so I'm going to have to run.
Let's go. Let's go wrap this
If
up.
you got a couple more questions you want to deal with, you're going to have to deal with it.
No, if you're having patients, I'm having work as well. So
Sounds good.
okay. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.